And now, Stephen, if you could start us off and tell us what were the main outcomes in the relation to people, entrepreneurships and skills. That will just come on. You don't have to turn anything on. As you speak, he'll pick you up. Over to you.
Right, well, good afternoon, everybody. As you say, entrepreneurship skills for a growing food industry. Given there was so much comment about that this morning, I thought I'd provide a bit of just a very brief bridgehead as I see it between some of the comments that were being made by the chief execs and so on during the course of this morning. Attraction of talent remains an issue. We heard some specifics this morning with 50 vacancies alone in one company, and out of 9,000 jobs, 25% vacant within the wider technical community. We've heard clear examples of where food is a great success today, yet misconceptions remain and comments have been made about making our great industry more exciting. Dare I say, more glamorous. This is a word that was used this morning. So one of the key points was that there is a clear marketing challenge, and that has come through very clearly this afternoon as well, of which more in a minute. There's massive appeal for the talent we're seeking. If you think about it, our industry needs innovative, responsive individuals, particularly in the context of the broad challenges, the economic challenges, the health and diet challenges, creating value, as was said this morning, more from less, across the whole supply chain. And quite frankly, if these grand challenges aren't enough to attract individuals who are capable, curious, and relish the opportunity and the challenge, then I don't know what is. But the marketing challenge still remains. So for me, part of what came out of this morning was three elements. One was create the excitement and address the misconceptions of the industry. Two was scope and clarify the need and attract the talent. And thirdly, design the programs and develop the talent. But this all within the context of the right behaviors and mindset. So, for those of you who weren't on those groups, there were 5 key questions which I've tried to distill in terms of the 3 challenges and opportunities. Firstly, attract new talent and equip for future needs. Secondly, encourage and spread entrepreneurship, i.e. within business. Thirdly, becoming a world innovator meeting consumer needs. Fourth, what's holding back small ideas becoming businesses and then becoming larger businesses? And finally, how can industry and education partners work to transform mid-career workforce so they can compete globally? I have to say that having sat in on a few of the groups, there was great interaction within all of them. And I have to say also that it is quite tough distilling what was essentially those 5 questions with the number of groups there were into what we've done. And I've done an element of cheating in this because I've done some subgrouping. Challenges. I think that they broadly come down into the 3 areas of profile and perception, access and awareness, and trust. Profile and perception from a young age has clearly inbuilt some resistance, which is why some of the issues associated with the pipeline itself exist. And there was also a strong feedback from the groups, and as I looked across each of the questions, there was a strong degree of overlap, saying there was a lack of coordination between industry and educational bodies, and sometimes some mixed messages between them of what is required. So the first real challenge is marketing our industry. The second bit is around access and awareness. And this is multi-level, really. It's access to the skills base with regard to innovation. It's access to finance. Not only access, but also some of the barriers are around the return on investment and the financial criteria that apply. access to markets, and this was multidimensional as well because it was new markets, it was access to supermarkets, it was larger company supplier criteria, and then access also to information, training, entrepreneurship opportunities, and how continuous professional development works. And the final component was on trust, and this was specifically on question 3, how can UK and Ireland food sector lead the world in innovation? The key here was that sharing commercial information may impact on competitiveness, and how do we do this? So that was a real challenge. 3 opportunities briefly. Collaboration between university and industry, specifically placement and professional development. The second point of opportunity was around e-learning development tools. These are now really becoming much more sophisticated. So the possible role for sharing of online resources and general awareness of improved programs. And then finally, an entrepreneur support network. Teaching, information, central hub. A culture of ideation and support to end product.
And your key next step, because I'm going to bring you to an end there.
Which is now, the next step is sex up the sector, increase profile in schools and universities, but this is a role for industry, universities and government. And this is further building on current initiatives that already exist. There is a final point, which I think is the essence of all of this, which is create a hub to bring together SMEs, large companies, universities, research institutes and state support agencies for access to membership, intellectual capital, human capital and markets. In other words, a knowledge innovation community or innovation network.
Thank you very much indeed. A round of applause for an incredibly comprehensive and clear summary of the discussions in a very short time. Mary, how did you get on in global food innovation for economic impact?
Well, we got on very well, and I have to say I sat in and eavesdropped on a lot of the groups, and I found it very, very interesting. And of course, it's very nice to add a little bit of colour. It gives a little bit of colour to the discussions that are summarised in the sheets that people put in. So I hope I'll be able to convey a little bit of that colour. And just to say that the question, the overall heading we dealt with was innovation and economic impact. But the longer question following from that was, how can innovation drive forward the UK-Irish food sectors, the profitability first of all, and to create new markets and therefore new jobs and better and safer food. So I'll have to break that down a little bit and try and address each of those parts in turn. The first thing that, both from what's written down and certainly from what I overheard, I didn't get any impression that the participants were saying that there isn't enough innovation or at least innovative research. I got the sense that there's a lot of research and knowledge and ideas and things that can be leveraged and stretched in new ways, so that it wasn't a dearth of ideas that was maybe challenging or hindering us, that many of those ideas are there and going forward. It was more to do with how to exploit them to create value. And so I have the sense that there's a lively research community on probably both sides of the Irish Sea, and both maybe in commercial organisations as well as in the research organisations and universities, but it comes back to collaboration, communication, as most things in life, and how to actually commercialise and realise the value that is incipient in those ideas. One person I overheard talked about all those big ideas ricocheting round in the universities. And I have to say, I absolutely loved that idea, and it gave me a whole new impression of my workplace. And I'm going to be going in there with great excitement tomorrow to be looking for all these ideas ricocheting round in the ether. But anyway, it was flattering and nice to hear. Anyway, the first thing about all of those, that innovative research that's going on, was that several people said, look, remember, we must try to, first of all, pick the low-hanging fruit. And indeed, I overheard one interesting comment which said, look, don't be going after too ambitious agendas when you haven't even exploited the competitiveness issue fully. that, for instance, the example was given of the fact that we still have quite a large number of co-ops here in this country, and that many of them would have plants and things which by international standards nowadays are still very, are probably quite small. And other countries like, say, New Zealand have only 2 or 3 co-ops, and therefore there's still quite a lot of gain to be got just by improving competitiveness before we ever start to step out looking for additional products and additional markets. So I guess it was a case of do our homework at home before we start to worry about the overseas. So the next thing was to say, look, we have a lot of that material and knowledge there, but the big challenge and what's holding us back is lack of communication 2 ways, both from industry to academia and from academia to industry. And in terms of opportunities, the main recommendations that came forward were essentially ways to try to break down those barriers so that more value could be got from the work that is going on. And under that heading of key opportunities, one interesting recommendation was something that we often talk about, learning from lead players. And the example was given that we heard this morning about Algeria, for example, becoming the second largest market for our cheese from this country. And the comment was raised, could we not learn from examples like that and extend that model out to other markets? So the idea being not to reinvent the wheel, but to learn from success stories and try and replicate them elsewhere as a first step, rather than trying to break new ground completely. And in that regard, the suggestion came forward that we have obviously a number of, and both here and in the UK, very large, very multinational and very successful companies, and that if we could leverage their experience and their footprint and their distribution systems by getting them to take smaller and newer businesses perhaps under their wing and to help to introduce them to some of those markets, then there could be great synergies and great benefits got by getting their help. And as a smaller initiative, but rather in the same vein, it was suggested that things like the Board BIA Fellowship Programme, which Damien runs from our point of view in the Smurfit School, that the idea that companies get access to good young sales and marketing people and have the benefit of their involvement, to send them abroad to overseas markets, has a huge benefit, that it gives those companies an opportunity to explore those markets and learn, what they need, and to do some missionary work, as it were, in developing those markets. And also it has the benefit of educating those young people and making them more sophisticated in their marketing skills for the future. So it was recommended as a model that should be widened out and, supported by lots of other companies. And from the point of view of next steps, one of the things, well, there were several things suggested, but the idea of having a focal point, some way to institutionalize the sharing of information between research agencies and between companies that are involved in marketing food products, that maybe you could have websites like a formal kind of portal where research is listed and described and so on, or maybe you could have secondments in both directions between industry and research agencies and so on, that there needs to be a more active effort to make sure that there is a transfer of knowledge and sharing between the various people involved, because there seems to be a difficulty with that at the present.
Thank you very much indeed, Mary. Round of applause for Mary for, again, capturing so many different elements out of that, and struck by your comment there about the lack of communication between academia and industry. We talked a lot today about the knowledge innovation triangle and how important it was. Your discussions underlining that again. Damien, over to you for research, innovation and business opportunities to shorten the food chain and reduce waste.
Thanks, Jackie. I've 3 challenges, 3 opportunities, three next steps. I'll get right into it if that's okay.
Perfect.
3 challenges are information, technology and business model innovation. In terms of information, I think the biggest problem in the food industry globally is nobody tells a farmer anything. information dissipates as it goes from the retailer or the consumer right back down the chain. I think that was commented on quite widely. Some specific examples of problems that are generating waste are problems of forecasting by retailers, the difficulty that retailers have in forecasting their own demands and then sharing that with suppliers, the use by retailers of best before and use by dates, also affecting waste in the chain. Very interestingly, on the information side, was how do we get waste to be a CEO agenda item? It seems that in many parts of the food industry, we've just accepted that waste is part of the picture, and only when we can be clear on who benefits economically can we get CEOs on board for this. Second challenge then is technology. There appears to be an opportunity for technology to play a bigger role in terms of the management of waste, as management of food as it goes through the chain. A great comment by one colleague was to say that the one opportunity with this is the technology in some cases doesn't even exist yet, but that's an opportunity for us. In terms of business model innovation, I think everybody thinks that shorter supply chains are a great idea. The problem is that most local supply is actually more expensive than more distant supply, so it requires business model innovation to solve that problem. Second issue is how do we scale these solutions that we develop for local supply? You can't have a whole series of very, very small firms all dealing with very, very small opportunities. It's not economically efficient to do that. And the third part of this then is that how do we get consumers to actually trust these products? We haven't had a major food scare as yet around a farmer's market or around some type of local production. But it's really only a matter of time before that happens. The fourth point under business model innovations, then, it seems that smaller firms have less capacity to deal with waste than larger firms, which I thought was actually something I hadn't thought about before. In terms of opportunities, again, three things. Somebody said there's brass in muck, which I thought was a nice phrase. There's a real commercial opportunity that exists for waste products from the food industry in adjacent sectors. One suggestion, Jackie, was to have a waste database, which I actually quite like the sound of that from a marketing point of view. The second thing was common with my colleagues was that research is being done in university and the need exists in firms. One colleague said that we need to stop faculty sitting in their offices and not talking to industry, which I thought was a terrific thing to say. And then an academic colleague replied, yeah, it'd be great if we get industry to think long term for once and get them to take into account university overheads. So there's clearly some gap between these two views, but to my mind, small things that could be overcome fairly easily. Third opportunity then was again in technology, and there was a couple of ideas around this. The idea of people buying food on a personalised basis and how that will be enabled, and that personalised buying being enabled through flexible packaging and innovation of packaging, which I have to say I thought was a terrific entrepreneurial idea for anybody in this room who has a bit of courage, or indeed for a university research programme. Three next steps: co-opetition, technology, and understanding the customer better. Most firms in the food business who I guess are here today lack the scale to do anything on their own. Margins are so low in the food industry because of our supply chain. The ability to invest in things is very low. The opportunity for co-opetition, cooperation between competitors is very significant. I think Board B have championed that hugely here. Specific examples would be joint programs of market and technological research, a database of research, which I thought was a great idea, and further co-opetition between, I guess, the Irish food industry, the Northern Irish food industry, and the UK food industry in areas like research, and I think tax incentives, which is a real opportunity for us all to cooperate. Third thing then is the idea of sponsoring new research in the technology to reduce waste. And that ties back to our first comment in terms of challenges. Some of this technology just doesn't exist. But it seems what we have got in other areas here again in the Republic is we've done this in some other areas. It might be an opportunity now to do it in food. The third point then was the opportunity to understand the consumer better. I don't think anybody actually knows what local actually means to the consumer. Nobody really knows what sustainability means. Nobody really knows what waste means to the consumer. But what we do know is that the only person, the retailer, and this is a quote from a colleague, the only person the retailer listens to is the consumer. Wouldn't it be terrific if we could in some way have some kind of UK, Ireland one-stop shop which actually connects our technological capabilities and our insight and foresight on market to effectively solve that problem and to share that information amongst all. So there you go.
Round of applause
Thank
for
you.
Damien. Thank you. Thank you so much. And very striking there again, that creating value, that, as you say, the lovely phrase, where there's muck, there's brass. How do you make money out of innovation? How do you make it profitable? And perhaps that's the key to unlocking lots of these things. Just before I come out to take any additional comments, anything burning you think, either a brilliant point that you made or someone else in your group made that you think has been overlooked. But can I ask you, is there anything in those findings that surprised you? I mean, I'm thinking, for example, Mary, when you said, people said, oh, there's plenty of innovation around, plenty of ideas. It's the creating value bit that we're missing. Did that surprise you? Or have you always felt that is it's not, I mean, you work with young people, you work with young talent. The ideas are there, we're just not so good at turning them into innovative products, getting them to market fast, that sort of thing.
No, I don't think it surprised me because, in fact, what I would say is it demonstrates a kind of maturity in an audience that they recognise that, rather than thinking, oh gosh, you know, if we could just do all these wonderful blue sky things, this might save us.
Yeah.
But in point of fact, we have an awful lot of things already. And it's really a case of could we go and exploit those properly, rather than rushing off to do lots more.
Anything you
Can I
found
comment on that as
striking?
well? Yeah, I think if you, done some work in the technology industry. The technology industry, they absolutely embrace and encourage entrepreneurship. Google encourages people to leave because they know they'll be part of their ecosystem in the future. In Dublin, we have this event called the Dublin Web Summit, which is purposely sets out to connect small firms with venture capitalists. We don't have any mindset like that at all in the food industry, and we need to get it. We need to encourage entrepreneurship. I've just written a case on a Costa Rican dairy company, and one of the things they're doing, because they're so successful, so profitable, all the kids of their farmers are leaving the industry. They're educating kids to work out ways that they can stay in the industry at the same time as having their own professions. We need the same thing. Encourage your kids to come into the food industry. It's a terrific place to work.
Thanks. Stephen?
I think the other point about innovation and ideas is that it's often about timing. And sometimes I think the other point we need to do is to improve the visibility of the ideas such that they can be washed back into the flow at an appropriate time. Because sometimes you're just ahead of the wave. You know? So it's more about timing.
Thanks. I'm going to see if there's any more comments there. I would like to get your personal views. So far, you have acted beautifully as impartial rapporteurs on what was discussed. But I would like to ask you, each of you, where you see the greatest potential for collaboration on both sides to really build on what's been achieved so far. So that for you to think about. Before I do that, anybody think there's something burningly missing from those summaries? Or a point that maybe you've been sitting here all day thinking, when is someone going to raise X and it's not been discussed at all? Something you would like to throw into the mix. Any final thoughts? Grow, hang on a second. Please.
Thank you. Well, I just wanted to thank you, actually, because many of our speakers today have touched on the fact that industry really needs to solve these global challenges. And then almost separately, you've talked about how the companies and the research centres and the universities need to come together to solve industry challenge, which is, yes, pretty much separately. Actually, what you've all done is talk about the two combined, so actually getting the companies and the research centres and the universities together to actually look at the higher level, so the global challenges like sustainability, which actually then help industry, for instance, reducing waste.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other comments or thoughts? And if I could broaden this out now. I see one. Kay, yeah, if you could take those at the back. Thank you.
Ross Campbell from Cybercolloids. One of the burning things I think is missing, and maybe I've not heard it, is to make UK and Ireland a centre of excellence and shining in the world of food development. We need resources. Are we going to talk about funding programmes, creative, transnational? There's UK schemes that don't allow Irish companies to participate. There's Irish schemes that don't allow UK companies. Can we do like a mirror of FP7, research for the benefit of SMEs, bringing industry and academic together? We're looking for a new initiative. Well, let's do something. If the two ministers are serious about this, they need to put some money on the table for research, for companies and academics to work together.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other thoughts, missing elements, ingredients that we need to add to the mix? Okay, I also want to put you all on the spot before we go in a minute. We're talking today about how do we build on what we've discussed today. How do we make sure the momentum generated in this room doesn't go away? If you have any thoughts on that, I will come back and collect them from you in a moment. But just on this question of where you personally now, not as representatives and champions of your specific area, where you see the greatest potential for collaboration between the UK and Ireland, either to build on what we already have, we heard about some of those initiatives, or something that isn't being done that really does need to be done more in the future.
For me, I think it's an emphasis of a point that's already been made, which is around this hub. It's whatever you want to call it, be it a knowledge, innovation, community, whatever. And it's improving the visibility and transparency and the seamlessness between those bodies, the triangle, really. That, for me, is the biggest challenge. But I also think that it's one of timing, and I think the timing is now, because what I'm seeing is a much greater degree of reception to the discussion that's going on about the food industry and how important it is. And I think some of that comes back to the food industry itself punching its weight alongside aerospace and automobiles, etc., so that it is front of mind and punching its weight in relation to the number of employees and the turnover for UK and Ireland. And I think there is that opportunity to really exploit that further. There's some momentum, and I think we can up the pace on it. And, you know, this event is but a start of that, really.
Okay, I want to ask you how we up the pace in a moment, but
I
first...
I think there's two related points for me here. One is that we have to attract better talent into the food industry. Today, most of our best graduates go still into finance, and I think the second choice is probably technology. I'm not sure how far down that list food actually comes, but it's quite far down the list. We need to have more women in the industry. We need to have better qualified people in the industry. If you can attract them. Unilever have embraced sustainability in its food business in a very wholehearted fashion, as many people here would know. And the numbers of young people who are attracted to work for Unilever has increased substantially as a result of that. The food industry is the most noble industry in the world. The opportunity for us to tell that story out there would be terrific. When these young people come into the industry, they have to see that there are opportunities for them, not to have rooms filled with middle-aged and older men in grey suits. They have to see that there's diversity. They have to see that there's opportunity. And this leads me on to my second point, which is we have to create an ecosystem for entrepreneurship. We have to create some system whereby a young person who might be here today, who hears a terrific idea, or who gave this terrific idea about flexible packaging, can see some way that they can get finance, access to ideas and support that would allow them to start their own business.
So that's where you would want to see the two sides. There is the possibility. They're the key issues.
Absolutely.
And there are some synergies
Absolutely.
to be exploited on both sides of the
We
Irish
could
Sea.
easily share that between the two islands, easily.
Mary.
Well, I guess I have to revert to my marketing area when I'm thinking of what I think we could do. And the main thing that I was very impressed by today was the idea that we have a shared USP as grass-based producers of very good meat and so on. And it seemed to me that there's a big opportunity there to capitalise on that. And somebody in one of the discussions I overheard also said that to add to that, we should be able to claim safe food. Now, we've had obviously one or two blips, and there is always the danger that that claim could be challenged if we let ourselves down one way or another. But that there is an opportunity there to have a brand, something like the Fair Trade brand is for other parts of the world, for things like coffee, but that we could have the equivalent of a Fair Trade brand, but it's a safe food brand, or I don't know whether you mentioned the word grass-based, but it's to do with naturalness and safeness and something very appealing that can be built around that and that is true and demonstrable and that we all share in common between our two countries.
I think the Origin Green brand from Borbia is a great start at that. And what I really like about that is that it involves farmers and it involves producers and it involves projection internationally. It gives a great momentum. And again, there's no reason why that at least could not be shared north and south. I don't work for Borbia, so I wouldn't like to speak for them. And I'm sure we'll be willing to share it with the north of England at least, which has large Irish population. So
Okay, one last question to all of you and to you. You talked, Stephen, about we need to step up the pace. I quoted the British Prime Minister this morning, who talked in March about we need to go further and faster. We mustn't let our foot off the pedal. The Taoiseach talked about the importance of maintaining the momentum. So if you have any ideas or comments on how we build, this was the first summit of its kind. How do we go forward? How do we build on this for the future? I asked this question earlier and people said it needs to be driven by the industry. It does need to be bottom up, but some of the panelists this morning also said, yeah, but it needs a bit of a structure because otherwise nothing will happen and it will disappear. Before we leave, and then we will wrap it up, I promise, any thoughts on where you would like to see the process go from here? From you and then from our champions last. Yes, please, sir. Thank you very much.
Well, I've said this a little bit before in different audiences, but
So can you
Owen Tonge from Green Core Group. But I mean, I think at this point in time, we know what the common points are, because we're we're going to get to the point of repeating ourselves.
Yep.
I think it does need an umbrella organisation to kind of put together the priorities. I think there should be only 3 to 5 priorities, and we should do what Patrick Oveny said earlier, which is put a date in the diary for next year, and then we should monitor where we've got to on those 3 to 5 priorities. If it's more than 5, we'll do none. I mean, it's the common adage. We know what the 3 to 5 are. We've kind of again talked to them about before. I'll go to them again,
Yeah.
but I mean skills,
Yeah.
research, etc., and so forth. We know what they are, but I do think we will need some umbrella organisation, and it does have to have a very, very strong component from industry, and in particular the retailer.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other thoughts on that? Yes, please, sir. Thank you very much.
John Colreevy, Enterprise Ireland. Just to reflect on initiatives that have happened outside of the food sector, and reflecting also on a comment that came from one of the groups I sat in on, was that industry hasn't seen borders. We had one company speaking today, ABP, who have a very strong presence in the Republic of Ireland, a very strong presence in the UK. It seems the barriers are perhaps between policymakers, government agencies, maybe even universities. If we look at what has happened in Europe through programs such as the ERANET programme, funding agencies responded to a call who control national funds and put out a dedicated call that was drew on the needs of a particular sector. More locally, we've had a US, Ireland, North and South nano research programme that pulled in, again, a call to address specific agendas. So I think there are examples around the innovation piece that can happen. I'd suggest perhaps industry is ahead in terms of what they've done already for a tangible next step in terms of an active programme.
Thank you very much indeed. Any other last thoughts from the audience? Yes, please, madam.
Thanks, Jackie. My name is Pamela Byrne. I work with the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine. And I just have one maybe suggestion, and you were talking about waste earlier on. And the European Commission last year or the year before launched the EU bioeconomy strategy. And the bioeconomy is basically an economy built on biological resources, which takes the outputs of one value chain and uses them as inputs for another value chain. So the waste from the food industry possibly becoming the source of energy for the logistics or transport industry. There's a fantastic strategy that's there at a European level. There is an obligation for those of us at member state level to develop this strategy for member states or even regions. And there's possibly an opportunity for us to collaborate with our colleagues north of the border and into the UK in developing maybe a UK-Ireland bioeconomy strategy that could perhaps drive forward an Irish, a UK economy in this space based on biological resources.
Thank you very much indeed. Any last burning points before I go back to our champions? Last one. Thank you, sir.
Tim Nichol from MIH again, sorry. If we come back again, there are 2 voices I'd like to hear in the room that we haven't heard today. One is retailers, who are frankly suspiciously absent, unless I haven't met them yet. They have the power to control innovation and are, in some cases, transnational businesses already. And they have a great responsibility, I think, to act. Secondly, the medium-sized enterprises, not necessarily the smaller size, but the medium-sized enterprises, who I don't think have had a voice in the room. I think we've heard some great presentations from some great businesses who are already transnational. I'd like to hear about how medium-sized enterprises can learn from bigger enterprises because we're told by government economists that that's where growth will come from the small and medium-sized manufacturing end of the producer spectrum. And they have a lot to learn, and I wonder whether that's an opportunity for this forum.
Thank you very much. Two very concrete suggestions. So back to our champions for a last word. For you, key next step, where do we go from here? Damien.
I think there's a guy called Gary Hamel, who some people here will know is a famous management writer. He has this great quote. He says, "The greatest return on investment in business is to management, it's not to technology." I think the idea of investing in technology is a terrific idea, but if you don't know what to do with it, there's no point in having it. It seems to me that many firms, not just in the food industry, that I have encountered in Ireland particularly, Jackie, don't have the capacity to use graduates effectively. They don't have the capacity to use technology effectively. We have, from Enterprise Ireland and Borbia, great initiatives in terms of development of management talent. Incumbent management teams in the food industry in Ireland. We need to do more. We need to have some research on management for the food industry. I think in Ireland in particular, I think the idea of scaling research on food companies here will be terrific. They've done the same thing in Germany and very, very effectively in their engineering industry. So for me, it's invest some more money in management research, but you might expect me to say that.
Mary.
Well, it seems to me that this is a very innovative gathering in its own right, bringing together all the different bodies involved in research as well as the commercial entities. And it did strike me that many of the people with the stands around the place probably don't interact, and certainly I haven't interacted with many of the universities that were shown here today. So all I would say is it would be good for us to improve upon that, and if anybody would like to collaborate with us in the Smurfit School, I would be only delighted to hear from you. So.
Thank you very much indeed. Stephen, the last word goes to you.
We know the priorities today has really confirmed them. I think I'm very much in Owen's camp here. So what we need to do is crack on with actually focusing on those top 3 to 4 priorities, getting the right mechanism in place, which I think we largely have, but we need to get a proper, cohesive UK, Ireland, focused small group of people who then communicate and deal with those priorities. And I think that's directly in line with what Owen was saying. And then we've got a year's time to actually review it and review the outputs at predetermined intervals. But I think we have a structure broadly in place and we can refine it and crack on with delivery, really.
Stephen, Mary, Damien, thank you very much indeed